Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's episode of Kibbitzing with Kagan. With me today is Matthew Cappucci, a meteorologist and a million more things. Make sure you stay tuned to watch this one. Matthew, thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Hey, thank you so much for being for having me. I mean, it's not often I get emailed by a senator, so I saw that email and I was like, wow. So thank you.
So let me just start by saying I'm not a weather person. I never pay attention to weather. I'm always about fighting the battles that I can win. And I always say I can't fix traffic or weather, so I don't stress about them. But you have made me care about the weather. So for folks who don't know the name Matthew Cappucci, let me just tell you, he is in the Washington Post. He's on Fox 5. He's on WAMU, which is how I got so entranced by him. He has written a book. He is a storm chaser. He is just all that and then some at a very tender age. So let's start. I want to start with how I got connected with you, which is I listen to NPR in the morning. I'm not a morning person. La, la, la. I'm listening for the news. But then you are so engaging. Tell us all. You started caring about the weather at age 2, and then at age 14, and on from there. What is it about the weather that makes you so jazzed?
I like it because it's something that is both chaotic but also very systematic. In that I'm a very type A person. I love when things have a clear-cut answer. And I'm a scientist at my core, math, science, all kind of my areas of expertise. And yet, no matter how good I am at those two things, which is meteorology in a nutshell, there are always surprises. And I kind of like that in that every day is different. No 2 days are the same. And just when I think I'm getting good at something, there's always a surprise. But there's that, and the fact that weather is beautiful, it's humbling, it's powerful. You know, to look up and see something the size of Mount Everest floating and spinning in front of you is unbelievable. So I love it for that reason. And just the fact that everyone can share in it together too.
Amazing. And no one in your family, you had no other influences growing up. You just sort of generically, organically decided that it was a cool thing from the youngest ages.
Yeah, my parents are certainly not weather nerds. My father's an architect, my mother's a nurse, and they're amazing people. And I got to say, the most patient parents anyone could ask for. When I was 2, 3, 4 years old, I'd be staring out the window at anemometers or the wind meters spinning on people's roofs. When I was 7, I bought my first video camera so I could storm chase, and I'd ride up and down the neighborhood in a little, Fisher Price plastic car, storm chasing during thunderstorms. And I was on Cape Cod, so there weren't really many storms. I'd be using walkie-talkies to radio my parents back and forth, letting them know I was safe. And it's just been like that ever since. You know, anytime there's a storm, my parents would drive me to the beach, even at 3 o'clock in the morning in a school night, take pictures. And really, they fostered this passion from day one.
And your mom went with you to your first National Meteorological Convention, and when nobody would have taken you seriously.
Yeah, she did. So I was about 14, 15 years old, and I'd done some work on waterspouts or tornadoes over water. And I thought, there's something here. We can better predict when these things will come ashore in certain environments in the Northeast. And so she and I went to Nashville for the AMS conference, or the American Meteorological Society. They have a conference every year for broadcast meteorologists. And I always knew that I want to be like a TV guy, be on TV, share my passion that way. But when we went, it was kind of funny because prior to me delivering my lecture, no one would talk to me. They thought, who is this random kid? It must be a kid of one of the meteorologists. And my mother, who's a very sweet lady, is not the most scientific person out there, we'll say. And people kept talking to her thinking she was a meteorologist. I was like, hello, it's me.
Reasonable.
Talk to me. And then I gave my talk. People realized, oh, Cappucci knows this stuff. And it just kind of grew from there.
Unbelievable. So when I was growing up, I just remember everybody used to moan and groan about the weather forecasts because they were never right. They would say, oh, it's going to rain tomorrow. Make sure you bring your rain gear. And then it was glorious and sunny. And in the meantime, the softball game was canceled and all that. Has it gotten more accurate in recent years? And if so, why?
Yeah, it definitely has. Nowadays I can comfortably do like an 8 or 9 day forecast, whereas in the year 2000, a meteorologist might have been able to put together like a 4 or 5 day forecast with that same accuracy. So we're getting much better at the medium to long range. We're getting better about climatological things. For example, will we have a warmer than average summer or a wetter than average winter or something like that? What we still struggle with, and I think this is why meteorologists get kind of a bad rap sometimes, convection or shower and thunderstorm activity, especially in pop-up environments. Like today, for example, I know that about 20–30% of our coverage area will see storms, but I can't say exactly who. It's
Right.
like boiling a pan of water and trying to guess where that first bubble will pop up. And it's almost a futile task. And I don't think we'll ever be able to resolve things to that level. But that said, oftentimes I can pinpoint where I think the strongest storm might be or who has the greatest odds.
Got it.
It's challenging because the public, and I'm sure you see this all the time, working in government and working public service, the public is really good at many things, but one of the challenges is risk communication, anything with probabilities. We saw this during the pandemic, and it's a challenge from my standpoint too.
We are so going to get to a lot of that, but let's talk about your fascination and hobby of storm chasing. We each have weird hobbies. Mine, I'm a nationally ranked Scrabble player, which is pretty random. So
Wait, that is so cool.
It is totally cool. I call myself a word nerd. You're a weather nerd. I'm a word nerd. So nerds unite here. So storm chasing. What's cool about that? How do you stay safe? And I know that one of your favorite, if you can have such a thing, was in Annapolis, and that did a lot of devastation. And you happened to be kind of right place, right time. So why don't you talk about all of that?
Yeah, definitely. So in general, I love storm chasing because it's really the time that as a meteorologist, we get to see what it is that we grew up wanting to see. We're all meteorologists because we became fascinated with the weather, and not just sunny days, but with the chaos and the power of the atmosphere at its most elegant, furious, and raw. There's something so scientifically amazing about, for example, a tornado or a hurricane, that air, water, and sunlight can all come together in these harmonic and also chaotic ways to brew these just unbelievable phenomena. When it comes to tornadoes, I really enjoy chasing those because they're such quick little things. I can be at my hotel at 11 o'clock in the morning, go get a tornado, and be back by dinner time if things go correctly. So every May, I crisscross the Great Plains looking for tornadoes, and I've shattered 3 windshields in softball-sized hail. I have a cage over my truck to protect the windshield nowadays against that giant hail. And I brought friends with me before who have no background in meteorology. They never know what they're getting themselves into, and it's always quite entertaining. But apropos to sorry. Oh, I was going to say, apropos to Annapolis, it's a great point you bring up. That was my second month at Fox 5, and I just been there for, like I said, about 2 months. July 1st was my first day on air, and there wound up being a tornado in downtown DC, which I broadcast live with the team. But when it came to the Annapolis day, September 1st, I've been telling my bosses and really everyone in the weather department for days, like, there will be tornadoes, because I'm kind of the tornado person there. No one else has ever seen one. I chased 8 last year. I've been inside a tornado. And so I was adamant. I was like, there can be tornadoes, put me on, put me in, coach.
Yeah,
but we were overstaffed that day. And the night before, I was badgering my boss. The day of, I was badgering my boss. And I mean, he was right. We were overstaffed. We didn't need a 5th person. But I had to go there for promos anyway, basically take pictures for brochures or whatever.
Right.
And while I was there, I said, it's like T-minus an hour till tornado time. Please keep me. And he said, no. I said, fine, I'll do it myself. And after I finished promos, I sprinted out the building. I was in a suit and tie, and I'm yanking my suit and tie off, running down the road half shirtless, skipping the stairs 2 at a time. And I drive as fast as I can to Annapolis, thinking, just having a hunch that something's going to go there. And lo and behold, EF2 touches down, crosses the street right in front of me. I get insulation and everything falling around me, leaves in my hair.
EF2, let's translate what that is.
Oh, yes, thank you for that. So an EF2 on a scale of 1 through 5 has winds about 120 to 130 miles an hour. So this was a formidable tornado. Crosses the road right in front of me. It was my closest tornado intercept.
Again, I'm not a weather person. 5 is the most severe or the least severe? Give us and what does EF stand for?
So EF, thank you for bringing that up. That is the Enhanced Fujita Scale, named after a guy, Ted Fujita, who back in the 70s came up with this scale to rate tornadoes. 0 to 1 being the least significant, then the most innocuous, 5 being the worst. A 5 will level pretty much any building. A 0 might have trouble unroofing a doghouse. So a 2 is what we label as a significant tornado, meaning it can cause complete structural failure, and it did in Annapolis. But the fact that we could see a tornado, it's very rare to actually see the funnel in this part of the world. It's normally cloaked in rain, cloaked in whatever. The fact that I could be there at the right place, right time, like no one's ever tried chasing tornadoes for TV in the Mid-Atlantic.
Hmm.
The fact that I could stop, get out, get a video, be like, hey, everyone, I'm meteorologist Matthew Cappucci, you know, explaining it. And the fact that my boss pulled strings so quickly to get that video on air, get me on air,
Wow.
everything that day worked the way it was supposed to.
Amazing. So I got to get in a helicopter to look at the devastation in Charles County
Yeah.
years ago. And there are no words. I mean, this side of the street was totally demolished, matchstick size. I mean, everything. And then like the little school across the street was untouched.
Yeah.
And this house devastated, and this house was untouched. I mean, it's so random and so awful. Do you ever do any of the follow-up after the tornado, or is the focus really during the immediate aftermath or something?
See, I enjoy the follow-up actually a good deal, not because I like damage in general. I hate seeing the human impact.
Yes.
But from a scientific standpoint, there's so much information contained in that damage. Which way did something go? Which structure was hit? Why was this tree bent this way? Where the top of the tree is hurt? Was it more the middle, the trunk? Was it uprooted? Was it toppled, snapped, anything like that? There's so much scientific information. I remember, I think it was about 2 years ago, August of 2020, the remnants of Tropical Storm Isaias were working up the coast, and they brewed some tornadoes over the eastern shore. And I went out to cover some of the damage. I'd been driving around there chasing storms in the morning, and there was a lady whose house had just been leveled by another EF2 tornado, so winds of 120, 130. Her house was just destroyed. And the Washington Post wanted me to go and get some quotes from her, but I thought to myself, how do I go to this woman who's just lost everything? And because that's one of the things that I find distasteful about a lot of journalism.
Yeah.
I'm unique in that I'm a scientist, so I can go there and explain things and sort of, you know, hear her story, help her piece it together. And so that's exactly what I did. I explained, I'm a meteorologist, you know, I'm here to look at damage, but also I'm here to get your story too. What can I help with? And for about 2 hours, I helped her move boxes, helped her move stuff, and we talked it over. I had my phone recording in the back of my pocket. She was fine with that, but I wasn't there taking notes. I was there to be a person. And I think that's something we don't see enough in news media and meteorology in general.
Amen. I agree. I agree. So one of the reasons why this timing really works is we just had 3 people die in a lightning strike, a lightning storm. And I have been working on 911 issues since my friend Carl Henn was struck by lightning in 2010. And it was a freak thunderstorm, and everyone had run for their cars, and Carl had bicycled up to a community picnic at a community garden, and he took shelter under a tree. And as you know, and we are going to educate my viewers, a tree is not where you go. And Carl was struck by lightning, and the 911 centers were completely overwhelmed. And so they got busy. They kept calling. Anyway, finally, someone took him to a hospital where he later died. And so for the last 8 years, I've been working on 911 issues in Carl's memory. So we just had 3 more deaths here in Lafayette Park across from the White House. Again, something similar. Why don't you do the quick public service announcement and talk about lightning storms in Carl's memory and in memory of this beautiful couple celebrating their anniversary and the other gentleman?
Yeah, my heart absolutely goes out to the victims and their families too. That was just devastating to see, especially because it's been since 1991 when we had our last fatal lightning strike in DC. Never really a multi-fatality event like this. But anytime there's a thunderstorm in the vicinity, lightning can jump more than 10 miles away from a storm. Just the other night near Culpeper, we had lightning from a dying thunderstorm jump 10 miles ahead of it into the clear air, away from rain, lightning, thunder. I mean, these were people, for example, the other night that were enjoying a nice, calm evening. They would have never guessed a lightning strike could hit their neighborhood. That was a completely separate event.
Wow.
The one in DC, where 3 people unfortunately passed away from, was during the rain core. But here's the thing: they sought shelter underneath a tree, probably trying to stay dry from the rain.
Right.
But when lightning strikes a tree, it can do a couple things. It can jump from the trunk to the people around it. It can explode the trunk and send projectiles all around the place. It can travel through the root systems. So really, a tree is one of the worst places you can possibly be. Inside a building, inside a vehicle, the safest options. And around Lafayette Park, there were some businesses within, say, a 2 or 3 minute walk or jog that people could have gotten to. But really, it's about staying abreast of the weather and getting shelter before the lightning happens, before the rain comes down. And really, because lightning can jump so far from a storm, if you can hear thunder, you are close enough to be struck.
So just to be clear, it's better to be in the open field getting drenched than to be under a tree, because then at least you're less likely to be struck by lightning and die. So getting
Marginally so. And if you're in the middle of the field, I mean, that's a horrible place to be too. You want to be inside, but as a last ditch effort, you want to crouch low to the ground with only your feet on the ground and kind of go like this and just pretend you're a basketball almost, to minimize how tall you are, but also to minimize your surface area contact with the ground.
Great, helpful. We are also grieving 37 people, Americans who died in Kentucky with the flooding, and President Biden just went down there as we are taping. He was just there yesterday. Talk about flooding, and we are going to get to climate as a challenge, as a policy challenge, but if you can just talk about flooding as a new and increasing challenge elsewhere around the country.
Definitely. And I'm really glad you mentioned increasing challenge too, because in the past 2.5 weeks, we've had 4 1,000-year rain events over the lower 48. We saw Kentucky where about 5 to 10 inches of rain came down in just a brief amount of time overnight. And unfortunately, at one point, there was a river that I think was the Little Fork of the Kentucky River, where flood stage is 12 feet. They got to 20 feet, and then the sensor was ripped off and washed downstream, showing you just how powerful these floodwaters were. But really, that was a 1,000-year rain event, meaning it should occur on average once every 1,000 years. But we saw that in St. Louis a couple weeks ago, where 7.87 inches came down in 6 hours' time. It's like 2 months worth of rain during the morning commutes. We saw that just last week in Death Valley, California, where almost 6-7 months worth of rain came down in 2 hours time. And we're seeing things like this more frequently. And I think, tying into that climate change element and tying into that increasing element, for every degree Fahrenheit, the atmosphere warms, the air can hold about 4% more water, which means during these high-end rainfall events, A, you're getting more water coming down to begin with. B, the column of atmosphere is more saturated, meaning the entire raindrop can come down without any evaporation. So you're actually getting more of the rain to begin with. And then C, if you're replenishing that air mass, suddenly that 4% can grow to 10, 15, 20%. And so it's a really problematic issue that is plaguing our infrastructure.
Yes, no question. In Ellicott City, Maryland, just to return it to Maryland, we had same sort of thing, 1,000-year, 100-year, and multiple of them. And I should have gotten those years and dates, but devastating in beautiful downtown historic Ellicott City. So let's talk about climate change. So the first thing I have to say is Al Gore was right, and we all should have acted a lot more quickly. Congress just passed significant climate legislation. Finally, thank you, Senator Joe Manchin. President Biden is going to be signing the legislation presumably later this week, probably Friday. Why don't you just talk about, if you know, some of the details that are in it, what you think is important, what we're doing that matters, and what we haven't done that would matter.
So I think one of the challenging things with climate change in general is how it's presented to the public and how it's communicated. I like the fact that you said climate change and not global warming, because really, climate change as a whole is warming the globe, but different areas are experiencing different phenomena.
Yes.
I think tying it to a local level, as you just did, is really the best option we can possibly do. But one of the tricky things I try to communicate to the public is that even if we were to stop emitting greenhouse gases today, it's kind of like the atmosphere is a runaway freight train, if you will, where slamming on the brakes might take a while to actually slow it down or stop. For example, even if we stopped emitting, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere would still be going up because of something called ocean outgassing. All the CO2 in the ocean and all the gas in the ocean would start lifting back into the atmosphere and continuing to accelerate climate-driven warming. So I don't want folks to expect an overnight fix. It's great that this bill is addressing that. I think one of the more challenging things we need to do is really amplify our resiliency when it comes to infrastructure. We were just talking about, 10, 100,000-year rain events. If we built for what yesterday or in previous generations would have been a 1,000-year rain event, in the next century, that might be a once every 10 to once every 100-year event.
Too little, too late.
Exactly. So we need to, not only slow things down, but also prepare infrastructure. Think back to Ida, for example, going up the Interstate 95 corridor, New York, New Jersey, last September 1st. 48 people died from flooding in these urban areas because our infrastructure couldn't handle it. So it's an infrastructure and justice issue too.
So I'm not going to get partisan here about how the Democratic infrastructure plan that is going to help every nook and cranny of our country that the Republicans voted against, but I'm not going to go there. So let's just be really specific. Someone watching this, they may not be a senator. They may not be able to cast a vote or make policy or appropriate funds for infrastructure improvement. What are 3 things that average human beings can do to make a difference, to do their little part, our little part?
That's a really good question, and one that, to be honest, I've struggled to answer for a while. I do think that, making one's voice heard through voting, through active involvement in local politics is a very big thing. Even here, for example, I live in Alexandria, Virginia. We have parts of town that are struggling with drainage infrastructure, and there are certain places in town, certain positions that people can vote for that would allow that infrastructure to improve. So really getting involved in local elections too is, one piece of active involvement. I don't want to be cliche and say things like recycling or like whatever, because those overall, they do make a very minimal difference. But I think being smart with how individuals choose to live is key. And what I mean by that is, for example, we have a lot of people watching right now who are considering beach homes, and yet buying a house on the water with stilts, probably not the best idea in the next 40, 50 years.
Right.
And so we need to take a bit of personal responsibility, try to mitigate the losses due to climate change, but also, make sure we're in a good position going forward. Good.
Love it. Let's talk about your book. You have already written a book this early in your career, which is extraordinary. I hope you have visual. I hope you've got one right there that you can hold up really fast.
I do. Give me one sec.
Do, 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 do. Come on, Jeopardy theme. Here we go. Dum, da, da, dum.
I have the funny TV headphone, but unfortunately, unlike the studio, this one's not wireless, so I have a 30-foot extension cord. So I kind of outran my leash.
Yay! Okay.
Yeah, so it's called The True Adventures of a Storm Chasing Weather Nerd, but the title that I came up with is Looking Up, because I really want it to be positive, uplifting. Above all, I really think that the pace of life these days is so fast, and if people took the time to look up once in a while, they'd be amazed by what they see. I can't tell you how often, people will send me pictures of clouds or pictures of rainbow or pictures of whatever.
Yeah.
And it's the most amazing thing they've seen. And in my head, I'm like, we have this 3 or 4 times a week here. You just never noticed it.
Yeah.
But there's also that opportunity for learning. Whether, I've said it before and I'll say it again to pretty much anyone who will listen. Meteorologists are the only scientists that people really get to interact with on a daily basis if they're watching the news. Most folks don't interact with sciences.
Right.
And so I'm not expecting people to go home at night and care what baroclinicity means or what a dew point is or all this stuff, but at least it gets them realizing that science is accessible. Academia historically makes it so inaccessible. Even the reading is dense, and I don't understand half of what they're trying to say, and it scares the public.
Yeah.
But if we can give them soft serve science, show them that the public is smarter than they think they are, that our individual ability to learn is more than we think it is, that might inspire a few more folks to sort of learn a little bit more and, really strive to see what's out there.
Love it. We are running out of time, but a couple of things. I was on a plane last week and it was a red eye and I was watching the most glorious sunrise and people were kind of dozing and grumpy and all this stuff. And I was so trying to tap everybody, like, look out that window, look out the window. And nobody could have been bothered. And I was just marveling at nature or God or the planet or whatever box you want to put that in. And so taking the time to notice is great and just puts a lot of life in perspective. So Matthew, career goal, you've done so much already. If you could, just kind of have a magic wand and do anything you want, X years down the road, whatever X is, what would you do?
I do 2 things. I'd like to start my own company, but I don't want to give too many details yet because it's kind of a good idea. But the other thing that I really want to do is have a bigger platform, and I'd like to do something Anthony Bourdain-esque. I'd like a show called Chasing New Horizons, and I'd like it to be sort of going to these places, exposing viewers to new cultures they might never have otherwise interacted with, but going to see and learn and do something, whether it be chasing the northern lights, going to see a solar eclipse, looking for meteors in the Bacon Range of Australia, or chasing down tornadoes, but the learning and the meeting people and going to these new places. One of the things I've been so privileged to enjoy is through my travels, my pursuits of weather, going to places I would never have otherwise gone. No one's going to Oklahoma for tourism. No one's going to, Grand Island, Nebraska. But so often we think about these communities that oftentimes get forgotten, and yet I go there. They have the nicest people. We have so much more in common than the media would portray. And I'd like to sort of do a show that brings people together and makes them realize the world is a lot smaller of a place than we think.
Love that. Love that. Okay. I'm scared to ask this because the answer is going to be pathetic, is what I fear. What do you do in your spare time? Spare time, since you've got 93 jobs and the book and the travel and all that. What do you do that's totally unrelated to meteorology?
So honestly, I've been asked this question a couple of times and I never know how to respond, because I've genuinely been struggling with this lately, in that I love what I do, but I almost worry if I'm doing it too much, because if you love what you do and you can make money doing it, and they're paying me more than I think I'm worth, I do Fox5. Fox5 I do for fun, not because I need the work. I work elsewhere full time. I work for my radar full time. I work for the Washington Post. I work for WAMU. In my spare time, I do another job, educational consulting. I love working with students and I love teaching. So I do that on the side. I really enjoyed writing this. I'd like to do some more writing. I just need to get another book deal and come up with something else to write about. But
all right, I'm going to pitch you you should get involved in competitive Scrabble. I think you've got the mind for it. I'm just saying.
I have a brief story, a very brief story. So essentially, and you might not like this, but I love Scrabble. But I have a couple of friends who don't love Scrabble. So we went to a board game bar recently, and everyone had 1 or 2 drinks, and we decided to play Scrabble, which is our made-up game of we'll have to take some tiles, make up a word, put it on the board, use it in a sentence, and whoever's word elicits the most laughter wins that round. So it's a new game. It's worth trying. Goes good with a glass or 2 of white wine, and highly recommend.
That's very fun. All right. Well, Matthew Cappucci, this has been such a pleasure. Where it's time for the Fast Five. 5 quick questions, 5 quick answers to let folks learn a little bit more about you. So I'm going to start question 1. You have traveled 120,000 miles, I suspect plus by now. If you could get a free plane ticket to anywhere in the world, neither time nor COVID nor anything else was any barrier, where would you want to go?
Either one of 2 places. Antarctica, I really want to get to the South Pole, or Christmas Island, because I have a crab migration where 300 million crabs go from one island to the other. It's the middle of the Indian or Pacific Ocean, and flights there are pretty expensive.
Cool. Okay. Is there a show that you're watching now, something you binge watch recently that you recommend?
I discovered Curb Your Enthusiasm. I'm way far behind. Finally, one of my friends introduced it to me, and now I've been binge watching that in my 20 minutes a day of spare time.
There you go. Question 3, do you have an inspirational quote or motto that guides you?
One quote I put at the end of my book, which is actually my own quote, but it's what I try to live by. I'd rather die with an empty bank account and a full passport than the other way around.
I love that. I love that. Question 4, what is your favorite junk food?
Ooh, anything from Waffle House. Waffle House, Wawa, Sheets. I love gas station food. And pizza especially.
Okay. And the last question, Matthew Cappucci, meteorological genius, wizard, and journalist in all things. What is your hidden secret superpower? What is a skill or talent you've got, something you're really good at that most folks can't do? And don't say anything about the weather.
Teaching. I think folks view me as like a TV personality, someone who's good with the weather. There are people who are way better forecasters than I am, way better scientists, but I'm a really good teacher. And my passion above all is teaching. Weather, yes, but teaching above all.
Is there what age student?
9 to 99. I've worked with elementary school. I do motivational speeches in China sometimes. I teach everyone, and I love it. It's a privilege.
Do you speak any other languages?
Spanish, but I sound how I look, so my accent is laughable.
Okay, cool. Well, what a delight it's been to chat with you. Thank you for taking the time to kibitz.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you again.
Take care.